You didn't stumble into that relationship by accident. You didn't just happen to cross paths with a narcissist. No, you were placed there. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly why. Now, I know how that sounds. You're probably thinking, why me? Why did I have to go through that pain, that manipulation, that soul-crushing confusion? But what if I told you that there's a reason behind it? That there's a truth so powerful, so life-altering, that once you hear it, you'll never look at that experience the same way again. You see, most people focus on the narcissist, on their behavior, their lies. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you. And the reason you were placed in that storm is the same reason you're about to rise from it, stronger, louder, and more unshakable than ever before. So buckle up, because the truth will shock you. There's a moment in life, maybe you missed it, that changes everything. It's the moment when you slowly start forgetting who you are. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. You start putting others first a little too often. You shrink yourself to keep the peace. You stop trusting your gut. You second guess your needs, your feelings, your worth. You tell yourself it's fine, that you're being nice, that this is love, but really what's happening is the slow erosion of self. You've been conditioned, maybe by your past, maybe by childhood, maybe by a culture that tells you being likable matters more than being honest, to believe that being good means being quiet, being agreeable, being small. And that's exactly when they walk in. The narcissist sees you long before you see them, not because you're weak, but because you're open, you're giving, you're willing to carry more than your share. And that's what makes you magnetic to someone who wants power. A narcissist doesn't look for people they can destroy. They look for people who don't know how powerful they already are, because those people won't fight back. Not at first. Those people will rationalize the manipulation, excuse the gaslighting, twist themselves into knots trying to be enough. They'll hand over their intuition, their confidence, and their voice, because somewhere along the line they learned that love is something you earn. And narcissists, they feed on that. You see, they didn't choose you at random. They chose you because you were ripe for the lesson. And that lesson was, it's time to come home to yourself. The narcissist's role in your story was never to love you. It was to mirror everything inside of you that still needed healing. That fear of abandonment, that belief that you're only valuable if you're needed, that discomfort with setting boundaries. They saw it, and whether consciously or not, they used it. Not because you deserved it, but because there's a version of you waiting on the other side of this that doesn't tolerate crumbs anymore. That version of you, they're bold. They speak up. They don't over-explain, apologize for existing, or trade their peace for approval. But you couldn't become that person without first realizing how far you drifted. The narcissist was a wake-up call, not a curse. Yep. And I know that sounds outrageous, especially when you're still licking your wounds, still questioning your sanity. But you've got to hear this. The moment you started giving your power away, the universe sent someone to show you what that would cost. And it hurt like hell. But that pain wasn't random. It was a spotlight, a siren, a push. You didn't get into this dynamic because you're broken. You got in because you're wired to love deeply, to give, to heal. But that same wiring becomes your weakness when it's not balanced by self-respect. And that's what this experience was designed to teach you. Because when you finally remember who you are, when you finally feel your own strength again, everything changes. You stop chasing people who breadcrumb you. You stop tolerating emotional gymnastics. You stop performing for love. Instead, you start attracting people who match your energy, not exploit it. You raise your standards, you get clear, you reclaim every piece of yourself you once handed over just to feel accepted. And that shift, it doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your life. We don't like to talk about wounds. We like to pretend they're not there. We bury them. We cover them with accomplishments, perfectionism, people-pleasing. We stay busy. We say we're fine, but deep down, there's this ache, this unspoken fear that something about us isn't enough. And that wound, that's where the narcissist found you. They didn't create the wound. Let's get that straight. That pain was already there. Maybe it came from a parent who withheld love unless you performed. Maybe it came from years of being overlooked, misunderstood, or told that your emotions were too much. Maybe it came from trauma or neglect or the constant pressure to be everything for everyone. Wherever it came from, it left a space inside you that was craving something. Validation, attention, love, safety. And narcissists, they know how to mimic those things. At first, they find the wound and they study it. They feed it just enough to keep you hooked. They say the right things, mirror your dreams, make you feel like they finally see you. It feels intoxicating because it's hitting the very place inside you that's been hungry for so long. But that attention isn't nourishment, it's bait. And when the mask drops, and it always does, you're left confused, questioning everything. You wonder if it's your fault. You wonder what you did wrong. You think maybe if you try harder, fix yourself, love them more, it'll go back to how it was in the beginning. That cycle, it's not about love, it's about power. And the narcissist uses your wound to gain it. But here's the twist. What they didn't realize is that in exploiting your pain, they exposed it. They dragged it into the light. And that's when everything starts to change for you. Because you can't heal what you don't see. You can't fix what you're pretending doesn't exist. That relationship forced you to confront the very part of yourself that you've been avoiding. The one that feels unworthy. The one that doesn't trust. The one that settles. And yes, it's brutal. It's messy. But it's also necessary because the same wound that let them in is the same wound that's going to lead you out. This is where the growth happens. This is where the transformation begins. You start asking different questions. You stop trying to change them and start focusing on healing you. You set boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect the version of you that's finally learning how to stand tall. You stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop tolerating half-love and emotional chaos. You begin to see that your worth was never up for negotiation and definitely never dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. And listen, this is hard work. Healing isn't glamorous. It's not all bath bombs and journaling. It's crying in the car. It's cutting ties. It's sitting with pain instead of numbing it. But it's also freedom. Real, deep, unapologetic freedom. Because when you finally face that wound, you stop bleeding from people who never deserved your sacrifice. You reclaim your story. You stop being ashamed of the hurt and start seeing it for what it was, a teacher. That narcissist may have triggered the pain, but they didn't define you. What defines you is what you do with it. And every time you choose yourself, every time you say no to dysfunction, every time you stop explaining your worth, you're rewriting the narrative. You're showing that the wound didn't win. You did. Some people are born into love that feels safe. Others are born into survival. If you were placed in a narcissist's life, or they were placed in yours, chances are you already knew dysfunction before they ever showed up. You just didn't call it that. You called it normal. You called it love. You called it just the way things are. So when the narcissist came along, you didn't recognize the red flags as red, you saw them as familiar. And familiarity is dangerous when your blueprint for connection is rooted in pain. That's why you stayed longer than you should have. That's why you rationalized behavior that made your gut twist. That's why you ignored the whisper inside you that kept saying, this isn't right. It's not because you're weak. It's because somewhere deep inside, your nervous system was trained to find chaos comforting. But here's the thing, your soul wasn't. Your soul knew. That's why it ached. That's why it eventually started to scream louder than your conditioning. Because your soul didn't come here to repeat cycles. It came here to break them. And that's why the narcissist entered your life. Not as punishment, but as a catalyst. They forced the truth to the surface. They exposed the patterns you couldn't see. They brought to light the parts of you that were still living in survival mode. And in doing so, they gave you a choice. Keep repeating what you've always known or rise into what you truly deserve. You were chosen for this work. Not because it's fair or easy, but because you have the strength to stop what's been passed down for generations. You were placed in that dynamic so you could see with undeniable clarity what needs to end with you. The emotional manipulation, the silent treatment, the walking on eggshells, the fear of being too much or not enough. That stops now, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after you. Because when you decide to heal, you don't just heal yourself, you rewrite the entire story for your bloodline. It's messy work. It means grieving what you never got. It means reparenting yourself piece by piece. It means saying no to people you once would have bent over backwards for. It means watching people fall away when they realize you won't tolerate dysfunction anymore. It means being alone, sometimes painfully so, while you rebuild from the ground up. But in that rebuilding, you find the real you, the version of you who doesn't chase love. They choose it. Who doesn't confuse intensity for intimacy, who doesn't ignore red flags in the name of potential. Breaking the cycle is about becoming conscious. It's about no longer accepting crumbs just because you were raised to believe a full meal was too much to ask for. It's about realizing that just because someone wants you doesn't mean they're good for you. It's about understanding that love without respect, without empathy, without accountability isn't love at all. And here's what's wild. Once you break that cycle, the world starts looking different. You start noticing the way people speak to you, the way they show up or don't. You start trusting yourself in a way you never have before. Your intuition sharpens, your standards rise, your peace becomes sacred. And suddenly, the same patterns that once kept you trapped don't even tempt you anymore. Because when you know your worth, chaos isn't attractive, it's exhausting. And the moment you stop choosing pain disguised as love, you change your entire reality. There's something about a narcissist presence that feels like a storm. 1 minute it's calm, too calm. The next, chaos. You never know where you stand. One day you're the center of their world, the next you're invisible. It's confusing, exhausting, and it chips away at your sense of reality. But here's the thing nobody tells you until you've lived it. Their chaos wasn't just about them. It was about you. It was a mirror. A disruption, a wake-up call, because sometimes the only way life can get your attention is to shake the ground you're standing on. The chaos wasn't punishment. It was the universe saying, hey, something here needs to change. Not just in your circumstances, but in you. Because before the narcissist entered your life, there were already parts of you screaming for attention. The part that settled for less, the part that struggled with boundaries, the part that confused being needed with being loved. You might have looked functional on the outside, career, friends, routine, but deep inside there was something unhealed, something forgotten, something disconnected from your power. Enter the narcissist. They don't just walk into your life, they crash into it. And when they do, they don't bring calm, they bring tests. Pressure, emotional roller coasters that force you to choose. Are you going to keep abandoning yourself, or are you finally going to come home? That's what the chaos was, a push. It was meant to break the pattern of silence you learned growing up, to break the habit of staying quiet, to keep others comfortable, to challenge the belief that love requires suffering, to stop you in your tracks and say, this is what it looks like when you don't listen to your intuition. That internal screaming you felt every time something didn't sit right, that was the real you, trying to be heard over the noise. You kept trying to fix the relationship, fix them, fix yourself, when what really needed fixing was the story you believed about your own worth. Because you weren't just tolerating chaos, you were adapting to it. You were becoming smaller, quieter, more accommodating just to keep the peace. But that peace, it was fake. And your body knew it. That anxiety, that knot in your stomach, that chronic overthinking, all signs that your nervous system was begging you to get out of survival mode. But sometimes we need a storm to shake us awake, to tear down the illusion, to expose the places in us that still need to rise. And here's the truth most people won't say out loud. If the narcissist had been calm, kind, and consistent, you would have stayed. Maybe not forever, but long enough to keep betraying yourself. The chaos forced your hand. It made the dysfunction too loud to ignore. It peeled back the layers you spent years building around your pain and said, look, you can't pretend anymore. And in that unraveling, you found your strength. Not all at once, not cleanly, but piece by piece, because waking up isn't pretty. It's not a light switch. It's a breakdown. And that breakdown, it clears the path for you to finally choose different, to stop living on autopilot, to stop mistaking intensity for love, to stop waiting for someone to save you, and instead become the person who saves yourself. That's what the chaos was really for, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you, to awaken the part of you that knows what you deserve and won't settle for anything less again. When things fall apart, our first instinct is to ask, what did I do wrong? We treat pain like a punishment, like it's something we earned, like the universe is mad at us, or we're broken, or we missed some crucial step on the path to happiness. But what if I told you that pain isn't personal, it's directional? What if I told you that every single moment of heartbreak, betrayal, and confusion was less of a curse and more of a redirection? Because here's what we miss in the middle of the wreckage. When something or someone breaks you down to your knees, it's often because you've been standing in the wrong place for too long. The job you hate, the relationship that drains you, the patterns that wear you out, they become comfortable prisons. You settle, you make excuses, you say it's not that bad. And the universe, life, God, whatever you believe in, looks at you and says, okay, I tried whispers, I tried signs, now I've got to flip the whole damn table. That's what the pain was. It wasn't punishment. It was a pivot. Especially when it comes to narcissistic relationships, you weren't placed in that dynamic because you were weak. You weren't targeted because you're broken. You were there because there was something inside of you that had to be revealed. Something you were never going to find while living safe and small. The narcissist presence in your life forced your shadow into the light. All the people-pleasing, the fear of being alone, the habit of overgiving, the silence you kept to avoid conflict, it all came to the surface. Why? Because it needed to be seen before it could be healed. You wouldn't have left if it didn't hurt. That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. If it had been just tolerable enough, just smooth enough, you would have stayed. You would have kept bending, kept trying, kept betraying yourself in the name of love. But the pain made it impossible to lie to yourself anymore. It made your spirit louder than your excuses. And that's what makes it a redirection, not just away from them, but back to you. It's not just about getting out of a toxic relationship. It's about waking up to every part of your life where you've been living asleep. It's about realizing how long you've been disconnected from your voice, your power, your truth. The pain didn't show up to break you. It showed up to break the illusion that you had to earn love, that you had to be perfect to be worthy, that self-sacrifice was a virtue, that shrinking yourself was noble. When everything fell apart, it gave you something nothing else could. Clarity. Clarity about what you want, what you won't tolerate, what love is supposed to feel like. It stripped away the noise. And yeah, it left you raw, exposed, maybe even alone. But in that emptiness, there's truth. There's space to rebuild from intention instead of trauma. There's space to stop running on old programming and start creating a new story. The pain wasn't the end. It was the invitation. It was the sacred moment where life said, this is not who you are. This is not where your story ends. Get up. And maybe you didn't feel strong. Maybe you didn't get up right away. That's okay. Because healing doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence, for honesty, for willingness. And if you're even reading this, if you're here right now, that means you answered the call. There's a moment. Maybe it hits you in the middle of an argument. Maybe after they've given you the silent treatment for the 100th time. Or maybe when you're crying on the bathroom floor again, asking yourself how you got here. That moment when something inside of you whispers, this can't be it. That voice, because for so long, you've been living in a story where you're the one who needs fixing, where you've convinced yourself that if you just love harder, try harder, stay quieter, you can finally get the validation you've been begging for. But that version of you, that's not the real you. That's the trained you, the conditioned you, the survival mode you. And here's what no one told you. You're not here to be a permanent character in someone else's emotional circus. You're not here to absorb their pain, to regulate their moods, to constantly shrink just to make room for someone who refuses to grow. You're here to break the damn pattern. You've spent enough time playing the role of the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who holds it all together while falling apart behind closed doors. And while everyone else may have gotten used to your silence, your compliance, your ability to endure, something inside of you is waking up. Because you weren't born to be a victim. You were born to be a breaker, a chain breaker, a cycle disruptor, the one who stops the generational trauma from continuing, the one who says, not with me, not anymore. And no, it's not fair that this job landed on your shoulder. It's not fair that you had to experience betrayal, manipulation, gaslighting, abandonment, all to realize your worth. But the truth is, you were chosen for this because you can handle it. You were placed in this dynamic not to lose yourself, but to find yourself, not to suffer endlessly, but to become someone who refuses to settle for survival when they were made for more. And the moment you started questioning the dysfunction, that was the moment everything started shifting. Because healing doesn't start with a breakthrough, it starts with a breakdown. It starts with the day you stop pretending. The day you get so uncomfortable with your own numbness that you can't ignore it anymore. The day you say, this is costing me too much. And when you reach that point, you stop waiting for the apology. You stop hoping they'll change. You stop putting your life on hold for someone who only shows up when it benefits them. You start reclaiming every part of yourself you once gave away out of fear. And that reclamation, that's where the magic lives. When you go from asking, why don't they love me, to declaring, why did I ever think I had to earn love? You change the game. You stop attracting people who feed off your insecurities and start drawing in the ones who meet you at your healed level. You stop mistaking red flags for intensity and start recognizing that peace is not boring. It's powerful. You speak up, not out of rage, but out of self-respect. You choose yourself not as a last resort, but as a non-negotiable. And guess what? That scares people who benefited from your silence. But you don't owe them comfort. You owe yourself freedom. You're not broken. You were never broken. You were conditioned to believe you had to earn your place. But now you know better. Now you remember who you are. And once you do that, once you truly own it, there's no going back. You become the one who ends it, who heals it, who redefines what love looks like for everyone who comes after you. And that's not just powerful. That's revolutionary.